Hello and welcome back to Dicebreaker, where today we play, well I say today, it was technically last year. But last year we played the Divinity Original Sin 2 board game.
2? There's not a 1 board game.
No, but there is a 2 video game.
There is.
But it's the Divinity Original Sin universe as a board game. It takes place, for anyone who is not aware, the Divinity Original Sin series is a series of RPGs. Myself and Meehan have both played them.
I have played the first one, I'm playing the second one.
You are currently playing the second one?
I'm currently playing the second one.
Exciting. I have gotten halfway through the first one and given up. The second one I completed like twice, and I really enjoyed it. So we have like a passion for the games. Absolutely.
Yes.
So as fans of the games coming into the board game, it felt very similar, right?
Yes, I would say so. It definitely felt like their aim was to translate a lot of the mechanics and the world into a board game. And if that was their aim, they've succeeded, as far as we know.
Yeah, it's got this strange, like, so the way that the game works, we've got some B-roll, we haven't got the game in front of us because we had a representative from Larian come in with, like, the prototype.
Super secret.
Yeah, because this game is on Kickstarter. It's available to play at events. We saw it at PAX Unplugged.
Yes, I believe by the time this video goes out, it will no longer be available on Kickstarter. I believe it has ended, the campaign.
Oh, like they've reached the goal kind of thing.
However, there might be late pledges.
And then usually there's like a retail release of Kickstarter games.
I would be very surprised if this didn't get a retail release because, oh boy, the Kickstarter was very successful.
Yeah, it definitely exploded. So take anything that we say with a pinch of salt because this is not the final copy.
Yes.
We just played a preview. And of course we don't know if the retail version is going to be different from the Kickstarter, which it always is, but yeah, there we go. But from what we played, essentially we had like a sort of pentagon, hexagon style, like almost circular board.
Yeah. It was
we had
around
like,
a
locations
clock.
around. Yeah, around a clock. Yeah, exactly. And the clock was kind of like your initiative counter. So based on where you got randomly placed on the clock, you'd tick through as it was everyone's turns.
Yes, I believe initiative was based on your character's actual
speed or something.
Speed, yeah. Just like I believe in the game.
Yeah.
I can't remember what attribute determines your initiative, and then I think you could get bonuses to it as well. And then the enemies would also have that similar.
Yeah. So like the weird thing about it is that. And the problem is with video game, board game tie-ins is that if you're not a fan of Divinity Original Sin, I don't know what you'd get from this. Really.
Yeah, essentially, it very much does feel like it's built for the fans. Like it's a perfectly fine game. Like I enjoyed it, but I feel like you get a much richer experience if you know the lore of the game and if you know how it works in the video game, because you can be like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. That's cool. I remember seeing that person.
Yeah.
And I don't think it helps the fact that apparently the story of the game, the board game, is based almost directly on the story of the video game.
Yeah, it's like events that are happening alongside the sort of like main events of the game itself.
Yeah, the way they described it was it's very much based on Divinity Original Sin 2.
And weirdly, it's set on Fort Joy, which is like this prison island in the game, which is basically the tutorial in Divinity Original Sin 2. So there's a lot of like, it's a really weird like placement of how they've done it. It's all pre-written, so it's not like, whilst there'll be like certain randomization elements, I think, it's not something that you can just play and then finish and then play and then finish. It's going to be a continued campaign. There's supposed to be a lot of content in it from what we could sort of squeeze out of our host.
There are certain locations, you have a certain time limit within each sort of wider location, and then in that location you can only visit certain parts of it before you trigger something that sort of finishes that encounter.
Yeah.
We did that. We didn't visit every single place we could go in this bandit encampment. So there are potentially cards and story events you won't encounter in your playthrough.
We certainly didn't, yeah.
Yeah, and I get, apparently and again, don't fully quote me on this, but you will be able to play the game through multiple times. But once you play the game through, you will be able to get this sheet that you can fill in with all the choices that you've made.
Yes, yeah.
And kind of what your characters did, and then you can send that off to, Larry in the studios.
Larry.
Send
it off to Larry.
And then they will base if they make a next game, they will base the next game on the majority of choices that the people picked. And that's why the fact it's based on Fort Joy makes me think that maybe if they make another one, they will...
It'll be that next
it'll be the next area. Yeah. I don't know what that is, because I haven't got past that bit yet.
I think it's just like, there's like a town with like beaches and stuff where you like wash up or whatever. But it's very much... there's a few things that have been sort of borrowed from other games, I think. Not like as are all titles, but there's a few things where I saw similarities. So for example, like that grid system that tracks your choices because it will then reference your choices back. So you might come across a card and, for example, it will be, I don't know, some person who's being attacked by goblins or whatever.
Yes.
And the man says, please help. And you either say yes and kill the goblins and you tick X1.
Yes.
Or you say no and you don't do anything.
Yes.
Which means that later down in the game, you can then reference your sheet and a card will say, if you have X1 ticked, a man walks up and says, oh my god, it's you, here's some money for last time we met.
Yeah.
So there will be like sort of consequences to the decisions that you make in game. And once again, this just feels like a sort of cardboard representation of what the video game already offers. And I think this is the sort of central issue I have with like video game tie-in board games, is the fact that if you've already played the games, you're kind of just playing a weird, like, in-person but slightly worse version of what you've already played. Because it's not like Div isn't available as a co-op game anyway. You can play with 4 people.
Oh yeah.
And you can play split screen as well. So like, it's an experience you can have with people in the same room.
Yeah. My feeling of the game was, I did like, and again, this is still in line with what you're saying, the fact that it's heavily based on the video game. Like, I did like the fact that it had an elemental system where you could spread the oil on the enemy and then you can set fire to the enemy and that would do extra damage. I liked the fact that they implemented that into the combat, and I like this idea of having it's like a choose your own adventure scenario, which I'm really into those kind of games. Where, later on down the line, if you've made a choice, you will have consequences. But again, there are like other tabletop games that do that sort of thing far better.
And in a universe that you don't necessarily have the baggage of a video game of.
And fresh.
And potentially cheaper as well. Which is another problem with Kickstarters as well, where it's like, based on the success of the Kickstarter, the retail version will go up in price because they've had to reflect all of the bonus stuff that's been added on, especially if you want all of the content.
I think I can definitely sense there's going to be a lot in that box. Because I believe, and again, I can't say this might be for the retail release, but I believe the Kickstarter version had miniatures for all the characters, and the character sheets, and the cards, and the clock, and the item cards, and everything like that. So I think it's going to be pretty heavy, but I get the feeling it's deliberately designed that way because it's for fans of games who like games that are all these different elements.
Yeah, it's for people who have played Div but are also like really intrigued by things like Gloomhaven, where it's just like a big old box of stuff.
Yeah, big old box.
Which is like 90% of stuff on Kickstarter, to be fair. But like, I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. It's probably not a massive reason to play this if you're not a Divinity fan, and even if you are, like, you've probably gotten most of the enjoyment out of that world already. If you're really itching for more, maybe it's for you.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about it, in terms of, I think it would have been hugely improved if they had just done something set within the world, but like entirely different. So with a new storyline, completely new characters, new abilities. I can't speak for whether there are new abilities in there. A lot of the spells we used and abilities we used were ones
familiar with the game.
We're familiar with, and they pretty much acted as much as you can in a board game, exactly how they do within the video game. And yeah, I think that's the problem. You're either going to love it if you love Divinity and you just want more of that. But in my case, I'm like, I can just go and play Divinity, you know, on the old PC. I don't want to then do pretty much exactly the same thing in a board game. Like it.
It's a tricky one because it's like and I always feel bad when we have these kind of narratives on these videos because I don't want to sound like I'm being overly harsh on something.
No.
Like obviously, if you've been tasked with making a Divinity game, it's gonna be a lot like Divinity. I don't think that's a massive sour point. It's more the fact that we want you guys to be aware of what you're getting into when you purchase something.
Exactly.
Especially if you're kickstarting something, because Kickstarter's like a strange thing where you don't really know what you're buying until it's out there.
Yeah, and especially if we suspect it's going to cost what it might. It's definitely important to be aware of whether you're actually going to enjoy this or not. Like, as far as my experience goes, I had fun. Like, we were laughing about, setting each other on fire or whatever, as you do.
The funniest thing is the fact that if anyone's not played it, once again, they have, as we've been sort of hinting at, they have this elemental system where, you've got like oil, fire, water, electric, ice, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And based on whether or not you get hit by that and whether or not you've got enough magic armor and all that kind of stuff, you can get the status effect that comes with that. So if you get hit with ice, you become frozen, which means, you might reduce the amount of things that you can do per turn. Or if you get hit with oil, then you're more susceptible to fire damage. If you're on fire, then you'll take damage every turn and all that kind of stuff. But it meant that I'm going to oil these boys up was a thing that we said all the time. And oh no, I've gotten wet again was always the thing that we said. There was a lot of comedic, but almost slapstick bits of humour in it, which is nice.
Because if you attack one location with any ability, you're bound to cause, if you have a teammate in that location, they will also be affected by it. So, and also certain enemies are naturally, vulnerable or invulnerable to certain elements. So it meant that I would say certain characters were incredibly skewed towards certain elements, which meant that they were almost entirely useless. And obviously throughout the game you're going to be able to gain new spells and level up and put points in new abilities and things like that. Again, just like you can in a video game. So I don't know how far you can customize characters, whether you can entirely change someone's,
I do think you get, over time, the amount of sort of items and stuff that you pick up. Because there's from what we could tell, there wasn't really a requirement to things. It was more just the fact that if you use things that you were good at and specialised in, then you'd be more effective. So for example, if I was a really good hydrosophist or whatever it's called, because I'm good at water magic, then whenever I did something that was water magic, I would get a free success on top, which is really handy. It doesn't mean that I can't use fire magic instead. I can use fire magic whenever I want, it just means I won't be quite as effective using it. And I think that, so it gives you a lot of freedom, but then on the topic of freedom, and this might just be because we were playing demo content, it felt a bit railroady. We were certainly being pushed down certain paths by the game. When we got to this bandit camp, we had a few different avenues to explore. And the game wanted us to have a look around before we hit the main camp.
Yeah.
But we were like, well, should we just go? So we were because we wanted to see, all right, well, let's try and break the system, see what happens when we don't follow the path. So we went straight for the bandit camp, and it just meant that we just suffered for it, which, isn't necessarily a good idea to head straight first to the thing. But if you're trying to go away from what it wants you to do, it felt a little bit like you were being punished for not telling the story it wants you to tell.
Hence is the issue of making what is a role-playing video game into a board game.
Yeah.
If they had done this as a role-playing game fully, then you can do whatever the hell you like, and then the GM will just have to respond to that. But the game is obviously limited
by what's written on the cards.
By what's written on the cards. So the frankly, the elements of, at least the elements of Divinity that I like the most, and a lot of players, as far as I know, really like the most, is the fact that you can literally do anything in the game. It's a bit buck wild to the point where you can...
To the point where you can basically break the campaign and you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore because I've screwed things so much.
Yeah,
it's the pop-up in Morrowind where it's like, with this character's death, you have severed the prophecy.
Yeah, you know, and that's the nature of a lot of... It's a very classic, you know, computer RPG. Yeah. That's the nature of it. But it meant that by translating that into a board game, almost trying to be a direct translation, it's almost like a limited version of what you can do in a video game. And if you're not into video games, then you know you could play this, and like we said, it's a good enough time, but it's just, it feels like it's limited by its own form, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it's also like, you're going to get some of the quality writing that you'll get from Div as well. Like, there's loads of good points to this game. It's just difficult to recommend it in comparison to some of the stuff that's designed to be played on a tabletop.
Yeah, like originally it's intended to be this, like Gloomhaven, for example, where, you know, you can obviously do plenty of dungeon crawling, plenty of combat, but you do get those opportunities to make choices throughout the game that do come back to, you know, to bite you or benefit you. But Gloomhaven was designed from the off to be its own thing. That is Gloomhaven. Whereas this is based on an already existing world. I will say there are some new characters. I played a new character.
The characters didn't seem to have all that much of a difference on the game anyway. It was more of like a, oh hey, cool, I'm Ifran, or whatever his name is, the mercenary guy.
You were a bony boy.
I was something? Zach? I haven't played him in a long time.
That was a new character as well,
Thane is what I'm thinking of.
You're not playing...
I wasn't playing Thane, I was playing a similar character.
Playing like another bony boy.
Skeleton wizard, which is all me, really.
Playing a lizard lady, which is nice that I wanted more of that, to be honest. And I don't know how much their personal goals and quests affect the game. Like, again, in the video game, you know, each character has its own sort of unique storyline, and you can choose to pursue that or not if you want. And I don't know how much, again, we had such a short time of the game, I don't know how much that's going to affect it or whether it's in it at all. But again, even if it's in there, I get a feeling it's not going to be hugely fleshed out. And this is the problem. It's like trying to straddle the line between a combat, you know, style game and a role-playing game. But because it's not really indulging fully in either, and it's not its own thing.
It's a tough one. And I, like, based on the success of the Kickstarter, there is obviously a target market for this. If that's something that includes you, just bear in mind what we've said.
Yeah,
like, if you're still super excited about it, like, you're probably going to have fun with it.
I get the feeling...
We don't want to push you off, but yeah.
Yeah, I get the feeling if you're already really pumped for this video's not going to do much to really affect that.
You've probably made your mind up.
But if you are on the fence about it, and if you like Divinity, but you know you're not sure whether this is going to be the best way to experience it, I would personally say
look at some similar things.
Maybe explore that kind of genre of board game first before jumping into Divinity. But
there you go.
There you
Speaking of which, if you'd like some recommendations, then we have plenty of stuff on Dicebreaker.com, where Alex Meehan writes lots of lovely lists and articles. Thank you very much for joining us on this video.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
We have plenty more video content for you here on the YouTube channel as well. We'll have a few videos popping up in the bottom right and left of this screen, so you can click on those if you'd like a recommendation. Also, hit that subscribe button and make sure you click on the bell icon to get notified whenever we go live. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Have a lovely day.